Morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone online. Just want to do a little sound check with Brian. Are we good? Okay, good. So hello, everybody out there, wherever you are. Happy Memorial Day weekend. It was an interesting moment. This moment we transitioned from the silent sitting together and the field that creates to this exchange of voice and language. In a way, it's the same thing. Can you feel that field that we created? And now as we have language and exchange, how that fills that same field. So I was thinking about practice, whatever we mean by practice, and work, and different kinds of work. And suddenly I have lots of new work responsibilities. Computers to get set up and accounting systems and making sure there's someone for the Dharma talk and all of these different board meetings scheduled and all of these things. Called work. And Zen is particularly rich in addressing this question of what we mean by work as practice. So not just because we have to or get something done or check the box, but how are we doing whatever we're doing? And is what we are ever doing, whatever we're doing, how is that a field of practice, an opportunity for practice, an opportunity to be awake, to wake up with each other? Green Gulch Farm Zen Center, where I practiced a long time, is a working farm. There are 5 acres of organic farming, and farming apprentices come and learn all of that. And there was a T-shirt that they had printed at some point, and it was a bodhisattva figure, actually female bodhisattva, I think by the artist Mayumi Uda, if any of you know her work, and with a hoe in the field. And the T-shirt said, "Working hard, accomplishing nothing." And of course, in a way, a lot was accomplished. Right? Farmers planted a lot of seeds, a lot of sprouts, a lot was harvested, tons of potatoes, broccoli, chard, lettuce that all went to farmers markets and restaurants in Green Gulch. So a lot was, you could say, accomplished. So what does it mean to still working hard, accomplishing nothing? Maybe that is only part of it. And so if Zen practice says a lot about work as practice, one place where that's really intensely present throughout the Zen tradition is in the kitchen, working in the kitchen. And I remember the different practice places, and some of you may have experienced this. There's an altar. And so you start out with service in the morning or whenever you're starting to work. But there were 3 little, I think this is at Tassajara, 3 little rounds of wood, I think that were cut from a tree, painted in ink, and it had joyful mind, parental or grandparental mind, and big mind. So these are 3 minds to bring to work practice that are talked about by Dogen Zenji in the Tenzo Kyokun, or Instructions to the Cook. And I felt a little trepidation talking about this today, because about 20 years ago, Jisho Roshi with Shohaku Okamura did a book on this essay, exactly, on this teaching with essays called Nothing Hidden. And as I was going through and um, rereading this teaching, which is not really that long, it's just a few pages, but it's very beautiful and dense and rich with many wonderful, famous stories, and it's ripe for essay, a whole book of essays about it. So it was nice for me to go back and find that. And in reflecting on this kitchen practice, by having ritual, having teachings around how do you cook food, how do you take care of food, how do you take care of pots, how do you take care of each other, how do you serve, by bringing a lot of ritual and form and language to that, there's a way to get into it and learn it in our body in different ways so that whenever we're doing whatever we're doing, it's in there. So thinking a little bit more about these three. So first of all, joyful mind. Whatever we're doing, what is it to come to that with a sense of joyful mind? And Dogen talks about, especially in this context of cooking food, to be serving the triple treasure. So this is a monastery serving Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So you're serving practice. And there may be a way in which we each may contribute to the Sangha directly, and that can be serving the triple jewel. But maybe even more broadly, if it's not Stone Creek, maybe it's whatever you're doing. Are you still serving Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha? And there's a joy in, we talk about joy in Dharma, joy in remembering Dharma. And then this is, it's not in here particularly, but I came across this. I thought, oh yeah, this is sort of important too. This phrase, the bliss of blamelessness, which is kind of funny phrase, bliss of blamelessness. But the idea of just noting, like if you haven't done anything that your conscience is bothering you about, then to celebrate that. That sometimes, if we've done something we feel bad about, that's really clear. There's a certain weight there that we have to deal with. But when we've made those right decisions, or we didn't send that angry email, or we called the person on the phone, or we didn't do that thing that we were tempted to but decided not to, or whatever it is, we're in good relationship with our partner, whatever it may be. There's always there can be a moment too to just stop and notice that. Oh yeah, my heart is clear. I'm showing up the way I want to. I'm cooking, I'm offering, I'm whatever. And it's not self-congratulatory or like I don't have any flaws, but this sense of like, oh yeah, this is worth noting. So getting a little bit further afield, but I'll just mention that we have as human beings this thing called negativity bias, where we're more attuned to threat or what's going wrong. So if you ever like do something and you get 100 emails that say that was great, you get one email that says, which one are you thinking about in the middle of the night, right? You forget about the other 100. So you have to take a moment and double down a little bit. Oh yeah, this is working. This is good. I made a good decision. I appreciate that. Taking that moment. And that's part of joy in Dharma. And also the sense that Dogen talks about this sense that, so if you're in the kitchen, cooking the food, serving the food, or if you're in the meeting and you're offering the proposal that you've worked hard on, whatever it is, everything in your life has led you up to this moment. Everything in evolutionary history has led you up to this moment. You get to be there doing this thing. That is amazing. And to take, wow, can I have joy in the opportunity? Can I have joy in the opportunity to be sitting here right now offering these words? The joy that people are coming together. And that will never, this opportunity will never arise again just like this. So this gets us away from have to. Uh-oh, I have to give that proposal. Uh-oh, I have to get that meal out. Uh-oh, I have to give a talk. I'm too busy. It's joy in opportunity. The innumerable causes and conditions that come together for everything we are able to do. Came across some interesting quotations. This is from a woman from Saint Mary Euphrasia Pelletier, I'm not sure her name. And she says, love, yes, love your calling, for this holy and generous love will impart strength to you and enable you to surmount all obstacles. Love, yes, love your calling, whatever that calling might be. And then there's the next one, which is parental mind, or sometimes it's translated as grandparents' mind, or literally elders' mind. And there's a kind of taking care of whatever arises impartially. If you've been a parent or you've seen parents, it's like big things, little things, you just take care of what arises, whatever's there, whatever shows up. And throughout this essay by Dogen, there's also just taking care of little things, which are seemingly little, but how we take care of them creates the field of practice. He says that things that should go in high places, put in high places. Things that are heavy and should go in low places, put them in low places. Or he says, treat the utensils with courtesy. Treat the utensils with courtesy. Or the idea of the rice, the materials, whatever it may be, once the cook receives them, to care for them as if they were their very own eyes. What happens, and not to complain like, oh, I wish we had better, blah, blah, blah. Those greens look a little wilted. Whatever it is, to accept it, to work with it, to honor it. And I think of this too for myself, this parental mind, grandparental, elder's mind, of just taking care of the practical stuff. So it's the hoeing, it's the planting, it's making sure the seeds have water, it's all of those very in the earth things that have to happen. And sometimes I think also speaking what needs to be said. And this is also what grounds the practice. It's not just in the mind or a big vast abstraction. It's what do we do in this physical world? And I was always one of the people who wanted to always just be in the Zendo sitting Zazen. It's like, okay, what? We have to have a work day? And I remember my second practice period at Tassajara, Soju Mill-Weitzman came, and for any of you who knew him, Abbot at Berkeley Zen Center, he loved work. He was very just in the world, practical, and instead of one work day a week, he made 2. And I was like, oh no, I would really much rather be sitting those days. But there was something to learn there. And he had a joy in just physical work, physical taking care of things. And somehow under this category, it came to mind this story for me of my first summer at Tassajara as what's called a guest cook. So half the year when the world is normal. Half the year, the monastery is closed for intensive monastic practice, and then in the summer it opens up, and a lot of guests can come for workshops and retreats and things like that. And so there are about double people in the valley. So instead of 60, 70, they're up to 150 people. And there are 4 people who are called guest cooks. And they're in charge of planning the meals and physically cooking the meals, of course, with a crew, etc. But it's a lot of responsibility. And I actually hadn't worked in the kitchen, or I just worked briefly in the kitchen before. And I cooked in some communal kitchens, but never at that scale. And so it was my first time doing that. And usually there's a period in April called it's a work period where people come in, and it's like getting ready for the guest season, but not quite the guest season. And so also if you're a new cook, you get to get up to speed a little bit before it's like for real. And I had the fortune to be paired with someone who was a very experienced cook. And she had actually trained at Green's Restaurant in San Francisco. She really knew what she was doing. And I really did not know what I was doing. And I got to train with her, and we were cooking together. And some meals she would be the lead cook, and some meals I would be the lead cook. And it was hard. It was hard to learn, okay, how do you do what's called a cut sheet? What do you need to have on there so people chop everything just right and the right quantities and these huge pots, and it was hot and physical, and the timing and getting the spices right and all of this stuff. And I really felt like I was pushing myself. And then finally, after some time and a number of meals and getting through it, I'm like, I think I've got this. And I felt this sort of satisfaction of working hard. And like, I think I can do this. I think I'm ready. And right then, she turned to me and she said, Meg, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure. And there's this sweet little place of a loft in the kitchen at Tassajara. You go up a ladder, and there's all the spices and various things are kept up there. It's a very sweet little space, tucked away. And she sat me down. She looked at me, and she said, "You're not working fast enough. I'm having to cover for you." I can still feel it, actually, like a long time ago. There was this, oh. And I think I cried a little bit. But it was like, okay, I have to learn to work faster. And I did. And she supported me. And I got to be a better cook. And it was by far one of the best jobs I've had in my life. To be pushed that way, it was creative and it was hard. And I was being trained by someone who really cared. And the way she said that, the way that she took that time to set me down and stay with me compassionately, but clearly say what she needed and expected, I still remember. And how different that would have been if she had just gotten resentful or made little side comments or just worked harder and burned out and then hated me for it. So this is also parental caring mind. How do we care for the things that need to get done? And then also, how do we care for each other and for ourselves? And then the last is great mind, daishin, great mind, magnanimous mind, big mind. And Dogen says this is a mind like a great mountain or a great sea. I think none of these minds is separate. They support each other, they exist within each other. And this great mind, this is the equanimity, this is the balance. This is the remembering nothing really is separate. Nothing is solid. Nothing is permanent. It's all a great flowing, even as we put the pepper in the soup. It's that both, I wanted to say like bigger view, like bird's eye view. But as soon as I had that thought, I realized, no, it's also right in the middle of it, in the detail too. It's in the substance of things, the spaciousness and the substance of everything. And so even as we're sitting in the loft crying because we're not working fast enough, is there spaciousness within that emotion? Is there spaciousness within the job to be done? Is there spaciousness when we're doing great? Is there spaciousness when we fall on our face? Yeah, and we could have been told this before going to work in the kitchen. I'm just trying to remember it. But there's a way, a layering in practice that reinforces this over time. And this is what makes a practice place. That's consciously designed, really over hundreds of years, to keep saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And so in a Zen monastery, if you're working in the kitchen, you start out with a service. There's already been a big service in the Zendo early in the morning, but there's a little service and a little altar. But still, there's bowing and there's chanting, and these three minds are on the altar, offering incense. And what you chant might be the Tenzo Kyokun. So you're hearing these words over and over time. And it's a place, a silent practice place usually, although there may be a little bell at some point where people put their knives down and just stop and take a breath and then go back to what they're doing. And in Sessei, retreat, when you're cooking, then, and it's time to send the food to the Zendo, the people who are practicing the meditation at that time, there's also a ritual around that, where, first of all, there's a bit of food sent on an altar, or actually, a special tray that goes up and is offered to Buddha, put on the altar first. But there's also a bowing to the food. And then there's a turning. We all turned, and even though it was like the wall, we couldn't see it, but the Zendo we knew was up there. And we bowed to the people sitting as our offering. And then again, to close finally, there's a closing of the day. So creating this intentionality and form around what we were doing. And we may not do that formally with everything we do, but are there some ways to do that? Before you open your computer, before you give the meeting or the talk, is there a way to connect with that sense of practice? Connect with that sense of service? Connect with that sense of joy and opportunity? Or in Buddhism, we also often are offering merit. May this be of benefit. Whatever, in some ways, I'll never know, but that's my intention, that's my wish, that's my dedication. And there's a story I heard once. A friend happened to be up. I don't know why he was up so early. He was up early in Marin one morning, like right around dawn, and he had parked in a parking lot because he had to take an early morning call. And in this parking lot, it was near a little shopping area that had a Chinese restaurant in it. And as he was sitting sort of in his car on the edge of the parking lot, he noticed this woman come, who was the owner of the restaurant. And when she came to the door of the restaurant, her restaurant, before she went in, she stopped and she did a full prostration before she went inside. This was her practice. This was her livelihood. This was her gift. This was her opportunity. This was her joy. Notice if you felt something there when I said that, notice what that was. And how is it, where do you approach your work and life like that? Or what if you did? Or what gets in the way? And maybe some days she doesn't feel like that one. Maybe some days we don't feel like that one. But what if we do it anyway? And that's part of the practice piece. And again, not like practice to get better, so now I've got it. But the practice, like you practice law, you practice medicine, it's something you do over and over regularly, no matter whether you feel like it or not. And this is what changes us. This is what transforms us. And we can do this together and create forms that help us remember this. So there's a rhythm too, for us. Felt really joyful this morning, seeing everyone coming in, familiar faces. There's a practice to that. There's a practice to coming every week, to supporting it, for supporting our own practice and supporting each other's practice. There's one more quote I wanted to share. I found this a while ago, and I've always come back to it by Tulku Thondup Rinpoche. And he says, even if you have a lot of work to do, if you think of it as wonderful, and if you feel it as wonderful, it will transform into the energy of joy and fire instead of becoming a burden. Even if you have a lot of work to do, if you think of it as wonderful, and if you feel it as wonderful, it will transform into the energy of joy and fire instead of becoming a burden. And please also do get some rest. That's also important. That also can be the energy of joy and fire. I think I will stop there. If there's anything anyone would like to bring up, we have some time, I believe. Holly? Yeah, take your time.
I'm wondering, the idea of work, the idea of work is an interesting one in that I'm wondering, does work necessarily benefit other people? Is it still something where I can get joy? Like if I do a crossword puzzle and it's work for me to do it, is that considered work? Or what is it? Where do you draw those lines, or how is work defined?
Mm-hmm. I think it's up to you how you define, work versus play. Work, there's something you're moving one thing to some sort of different state in a way. So it maybe there's effort in doing the crossword puzzle, right? And I think they're different, whatever you're doing, whether you call it work or play, I think they're different layers. So on one hand, how are you bringing yourself to that, that your quality of mind and presence and intention. And then also, there may be ways that you may say it doesn't benefit other people exactly, but also in a way that may be good for your mental well-being or just your liveliness and happiness. And then also, if that's supporting you and your health and well-being, if you've committed, to showing up in a world that's in a way of service, caring for yourself is also in that bigger context.
I always think of work as necessarily connected with the idea of purpose. And purpose would be maybe benefiting other people, but like I said, if I was doing a crossword puzzle, what is the purpose of that? I lose it and throw it away. So it's just sort of that question as to what it,
Yeah, there's an end of whatever it may be, but there's also the activity and the quality of the activity, which is the quality of every moment, whatever we're doing. And sometimes we may have a job or a position that's very clearly, it's a meaning-based, mission-driven job, and that's great. But maybe it's making folders. Well, this is actually very helpful. I like my folder. But whatever it is, even if it's sweeping the floor, if it's not clearly under big P purpose, still how you show up for that and your heart orientation gives it that sense of purpose also. And then if you're working with other people, how are you working with other people? And this is also, it's also struck me that in the Eightfold Path and traditional early Buddhism, a monastic tradition, but right in there is right livelihood. So on one hand, whatever you're doing, even if it seems very simple or humble or not directly benefiting others, still there's that sense that there's a wholesomeness to it. If you feel like it's harmful, then that's where you have to question, do I want to show up for this? And of course, we live in such a complex world. It's very hard to say, is this 100% beneficial? How we sort, where's our supply chain, right? It's just really hard to do that. But at the same time, we can keep open to that inquiry the best we can.
Thanks, Meg. Thank you for the talk. I sort of tied it in with last week's need for rest. And there was a quote my dad shared with me that, which kind of related to last week, was that we're human beings, not human doings, which really resonated with me around last week. But this week, I have to say that there's a couple of quotes that have sort of guided how I think about work. And I was looking on my phone to see if I had it there. I have one of them as an email signature because it's pretty long and I don't have it memorized. But basically, it was a quote about some dude in the 18th century, but his approach was, he approached work and play as if they were the same thing. And he didn't really distinguish. And if somebody wanted to distinguish, he was going to leave that to somebody else. So that wasn't his job. He was just going to go for it. And I really appreciate that. And then there was a quote from Gandhi, I believe, that said that, what you're doing is like no more important than a grain of sand, but it's really important that you do it really well. So that comes back to your nothing. Like, that almost pissed me off when you said that, because I spent a lot of time helping Peter get the irrigation system set up for the garden and green belts. Like, what do you mean we didn't do anything? Well, I got it. So thank you. Oh, and one other, there's a woman who wrote a book on beginning meditation, and the title of it is "Nothing Happens Next."
Thank you very much. Peggy.
I think the hard part is to remember this all day. In the monastery, they set it up so it keeps reminding you. And although I forget to do this all the time, but I think that God of practice really helps. So one example was when before I was retired, I was a tax accountant. And so when someone would come, I would have a folder, either a folder on the computer or an actual folder. And I had this Ghana that said, as I open this folder, I open my heart to this person in order to hear what they say and to hear what is left unsaid. You know, it's. I think if we can create these things throughout the day, then it helps remind us, because I forget over and over and over again to do the practice.
I love that. Thank you. So saying just this idea of creating gathas, or these short sayings. And they're traditional versions, but you can create your own, or I think there's some books of verse that have suggestions. But again, this comes back to a practice. So then if every time you open that folder, then you get into that there can be a positive habit energy where that just comes up naturally because you've done it so many times, but to come to it freshly, that orients that intention. Yeah, so I think that is really and talking about the monastery, that I didn't fully see or clearly see what a practice place or a monastery was until I left one and went to teach in a corporation. That really there's just so many layers of bells and Buddhas and clackers and chants that are just saying, like, remember, wake up, bow to the person, da da da. It's a very rich field. And then going into like just a standard corporate environment, which maybe had a motivational photo on the wall or something, saying, but there was nothing like that. And there was not necessarily a shared understanding. Sometimes companies do have that, but it's that same sense of that the whole environment supports you to do that, to remember. That's stunning.
I've just been blessed in that I've always found a great joy in the work I've done, whether it was something that I did to make money, and now that I'm retired, something that I choose to do. But I want to hear more about the joy and the fire, because I love work so much. I start out with this great connection, and I get fired up, and then all of a sudden I'm taking off like a rocket ship, and I can find myself losing the joy or finding frustration because the work's not flowing or whatever's happening. And I think some of these suggestions have already been said. Maybe if I had more time to pause and go back to the purpose, the heart. But what else would you say about that? How do you keep from getting lost in the fire?
So what do you do when that happens to you?
I usually just walk away from the work for a minute, or longer, and just say I need a rest,
right?
And that's okay, and I will be better when I do.
And how does that work for you?
It works, but it's I guess there's still this part of me that just says, well, why is that? You haven't finished the job, and you haven't worked 8 hours, and you haven't, and you haven't, and you haven't. And then I chalk it up to, well, I'm older and I can't work as long. But it's not given to myself as a gift, I guess, and saying, this is okay to take care, this is just as good as the work you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So that that listening to that voice that says, oh, but wait, you haven't worked 8 hours, or why can't you do this, or da da da. Right. So that's what's the practice is I think you are listening to and being compassionate with and inquiring with that voice and where that comes from and how that maybe even gets in the way a little bit of the full presence with what you're doing. That kind of flowing, allowing that flowing.
And I think my experiences come from a traditional work world instead of, spending a lot of my life in a monastery and getting, and then coming in, it's like the reverse. And so now I'm trying to pull things into my previous experiences from this practice.
And what does it mean to, and not just asking you, but it's to hold in general, like to be fully engaged and wholehearted and generous in whatever work we're doing versus feeling like we don't have any value unless we do a certain amount of work in a certain way and get certain recognition for it. Right? That's very interesting. And I think in our culture, this Western culture, particularly pervasive. So there's a lot of, maybe, whatever I've said here, it could be simply invitation for inquiry. Because it's kind of an intense question, really. How do we show up? What do we think we're doing? How do we relate with ourselves and other people in the wider world in that? Yeah, curious. Happy to continue the conversation as people think about it. For today. Thank you.